Hi Ms. Ng and hello to whoever's watching this. So today I'll be presenting my final project for visual programming, and the title of my project is Ethereal Waves Whispers. So the concept for this project is that it explores the emotional space between dreaming and waking up through the aesthetics of dream pop. For the first network, I used around like 3 dream pop vibes music videos, and I split them into 2 using like CapCut, so I can have like 6 videos. So I have one main video, is this one. This one I put it into a fit so that we don't have this black color border, and then I use a transform to make it move left to right like this using the apps time, and then I put it into a null, and from this null I put it into a blur, and I comb both this null and blur together so they can achieve like a blurry dreamy effect. And over here is the BGM, and over here are the other 5 videos, so I put them into a switch state so they can like switch between each other. And for the switch index I use this LFO, and over here is overall the video's dreamy effect but much more exaggerated. And the moving effect over here, like the zooming in and zooming out, I use a transform and I put an LFO to the scale so it can achieve like this. It zooms it out, and then I place a feedback and another switch. I put it to a transform and another blur, so when it switches the border, it actually creates a blurry and yeah, like this, so quite dreamy effect. And over here I made a dreamy background. I use a noise and a bloom and a constant, and as for the noise I made the seed. As for the noise at the transform part, I use apps time to make the translate move around a bit. And then over here I connected the com null and then this com into here so they can switch all between, and also I use the alpha again. As for the shape of it, I used the circle and I adjusted some of the parameters to achieve this shape and the border's blurry effect. And I also use the upsum at the rotate so it can rotate like this. And then I comb both of these together, and after that I put an over with this constant background so it can achieve like this. And after that I use another over to pull this comp with this one so that I can have just a little bit of the background seeping out like this. And then that's all for this, and that's all for this scene. So on to the next one. So for the second scene, I wanted to do audio reactive, so I put in my audio file in first, and then I place a math and analyze and a filter to make it move smoother and not so harsh. And then I also add a speed in, and then I put a constant in here, and then I put speed in, and I also adjusted to add like resolution intersections so I can use it later on. And then I made the line movement first, so I use the constant speed inside this noise at the translate here so it can move around, and then I use a limit and then I put it to a null. After that I pull it into a top to chop so I can receive this data, and then I selected it, and then I put it into a sop, chop to sop, and I selected RNG only, and then I pull it into a null like this. And then from the null I pull it into tool geo, so this is the line and this I use the points using these two materials, and then I place a cam, and I also placed 2 renders for these two, and I also took the resolution from over here, the constant. And then from these 2 here I put them into a comp, and the comp actually makes it into like lines and just points. The text are added afterwards, and then I put it into a null. So this is where I set the line and points, and over here I put a blur so it can be a little bit much more blurry, and here I added a feedback so it can create an effect like this. And for the feedback I place a keyboard in so I can pause it whenever I want, and then I use a blur to make the feedback also a bit much more blurry, and I use a level to adjust opacity and brightness. And over here I place a comp so I can comp the blur and level together so it creates an effect like this. It's a bit blurry but not so blurry. And then I did the text effect. It doesn't have any meaning but I think it looks cool, so yeah. And from here, this tree select, I selected the top to chop this data, so I selected here, and then I place a map for all 3 of them, and then I merge them together and I rename them to X, Y, and text. So then I pull it to a chop to that, and then it creates like a lot of these data numbers, and then I place them into a text top, so it creates like this. And then from here I use a top select to select the text just now here, and then I place a transform again. This transform is to resize it, change the sizing, and then I place it into a comp here just now so that it creates an effect like this. We're moving around together. And then for the displace effect, so I use a photo here I found online, and then I use a noise, and again the noise I took the speed from a constant so I can move like this, and then I place them into effect so it's like this. And the displace I made it, as for the displace I mainly use the displace weight to adjust it, and just a little bit only because I don't want to make it like too weird. And then from there I use a noise and also a textured 3D, and I put these 2 into a time machine so it creates an effect like this. And then after that, I place a time machine and also the lines over here that I selected into here, so they can make it effects like this. And then I put it into a comp. And as for the comp, another one, I also did the line colors and text colors. So over here, this one I also selected this comp, and then this one I selected this null. And then this selector I connected it to the displays, yeah. And for this one, I place it into a bloom so they can glow around like this. And then I add a constant afterwards so I can change colors. And then I made it to fit into a resolution that I wanted. And then I comp them together so it creates like this. And then afterwards, I made a border effect. So for the border effect, it's like the first scene. Over here, I use a rectangle instead of a circle, and then I adjust the parameters so it creates like a blurry, transparent border. And then I comp this and this one together so it creates like this. Afterwards, I made a noise again and a constant, and I comp both of them together to make an effect of like orange drops moving around. And mainly I use like apps time to make it move around like that. And then I put them into an over so it creates an effect like this. So this is the final outcome. Okay, so onto the third scene. So for the third scene is the underwater jellyfish scene. So over here I also made it audio reactive, but mainly the background. So I'll explain the jellyfish first. So actually the jellyfish, one jellyfish is actually just all of these only. So I use a pattern and then I use an apps time to create like flowy lines like this. So this is the first one and this is the second. So the first one I placed it into a chop to pop, and it creates a little line like this. So this is the tentacle, and from here I place it into this one. This one is actually the bell of the jellyfish, so it moves like this. Okay, and then for this one I place it into a copy and then a twist and a transform. So at the twist, so at the copy I change the parameters of like rotate, so it dictates like how many tentacles I have. And then for this one I place a revolve so it can create the bulb like this. And then I place a transform to rotate it. This one is also place a transform to rotate it, and then I merge them together so it creates like a jellyfish. And then I place it into a null, and from the null I place it into a geo, and I use the light material for this jellyfish. And then I render it, and from the render here I place a camera light, and then for the movement of the jellyfish, I mainly adjust from this geo over here. So it's mainly the translate. I'm using like the apps time, change it a little bit so it creates like this. And also for where it's moving from where to where, I change the pivot and then also the rotation. So I redid them like around 9 times so I can achieve this much jellyfish. And then first, this is an audio reactive visual, so here is the audio part. I pull in an audio file in, and then I pull a math and audio expect, and I also use the trim, adjusting the parameters here, and then I place it analyze and also a lag, slow it down a little bit, and then a slope and math gain, and then I place a limit so that I can like don't have that much, so that I can limit it, and then I place a trigger and then a switch, and then I rename it, and I put a trail here to see like the data whether it's like okay or not. And then this is the kick of the song. So using this kick, I place a noise, and then with that kick here, I place the noise seed over here so that it shifts and changes. And also I adjusted the transform here using apps time to make it like slowly go up too. And then over here I made a displace effect by using feedback and the noise and slope, and then displace them together again. And I place a level to adjust brightness and contrast all of it. And then I comp this and this null together so it achieves like this type of look. And then I place it into a null, and from this null I put it into a lookup, normal map, and a monochrome. So these three are the PBR maps data for this here. And I also use the color picker here, so the colors mimic an ocean. And from the PBR effect here, I place it into this geometry. So this geometry here is actually the shape of my background. So I use a grid sop, and then I place a twist and a transform to make it a little bit longer, and then I use an attribute create here, and then I place it into a null, and I pull into a geo, so it actually has this effect, it's actually moving. And then from here I place render and camera and lights, and after that I made it the edge also the blurry effect. So over here I place it into a level, so you can see it's actually quite harsh, not quite the dreamy effect I want. So I place another level, adjust the opacity and everything, and I place the HSB adjust and a luma level to brighten it up a little bit more, and then I place a null. Over here I put an edge and I place a level to make the edge not so clear by adjusting the opacity, and then I comp both of them together, and then I use a ramp to adjust this, and then I place it into a Luna Blur again, and then from there I put it into a null, so I achieved it what I wanted, like this. And then over here was the render I said just now, and then I place a bloom after the render here so they can glow, and then I put a null, and I put an over for both of them, and then it's the dreamy border again. So I think I did this around like 3 times or so. So it's actually the same as just now, rectangle, adjusted the parameters, and then I comp both of them together, and also the noise. I just adjusted the color to like match with the aesthetic, and then place it into an over, and that is all for this third scene. So for this reality, it's also audio reactive. It's actually quite similar with the first scene, like an opening and then this is a closing. So for this one, I actually use a video, and this video is actually City Life made by these guys. And then so I put in the video, and then I put it into a null and a level to make it not that high contrast, and then I use a lens distort to make it an effect like this, and then I put it into a null, and from the null I put it into a blur because I'll use it later, and from this null I also pull it out again to create an edge color effect like this. So from this here, now I pull into an edge, adjusted some of the parameters so I can get some of the scene like this, and I place a ramp to place the colors, and then I put into a level and turn down the opacity a little bit. And back to here, I choose the lens distort and place it into a level here. I adjust the invert and black level a little bit more here, and then I put another HSV adjust, and then a threshold. And from this threshold, I placed it into a circle, and for the circle, I actually use the audio reactive. I'll explain audio reactive first. So audio file in again, and then I use an audio analysis to get the rhythm, kick, and snare, but I actually use the rhythm only. Okay, so for this rhythm, I use it for the circle center over here, so it can like flash, appears sometimes and sometimes doesn't appear. And then over here, I made an LFO to change the side of the circle. So I place an LFO and then I limit it from 3 to 9 because I need at least 3 sides first, and I place it here, so it changes like this. And then I place a ramp, and the ramp I adjust the colors a bit, and then I place another threshold to make it a little bit luminance. And then I use a feedback here, connect it to a feedback, and for this feedback I place a blur, and then a resolution, and then another resolution, and then a level here. For the level, I turn up the brightness a bit much more exaggerated, and I place a displace. The displace, I connected the level and also the blur effect over here, so it creates like this. And then I place another level, turn down the contrast a bit, and then I place it into a comp, connecting this shape and this video. And then from there, I place them into an over, but before the over, place this blurry video with this ramp, with this edge color effect into a comp, so I can achieve it like this. And then I place them into over like this. And this is the overall effect that I want for this scene. And then lastly, I did the dreamy border effect also for this. Place a little bit of color so it resembles like waking up from a dream, but actually not. And that is all for this scene. And now I'll show you how I control all of them. So, and for the container, I also did some of like customized components. So like over here, you can adjust the color and the line color, and also the volume of the background music. And over here, you can adjust like the jellyfishes. And I also did a keyboard in here, so I can like pause the music over here using this cue. And I use an out for all the audio, and then I pull them into a null. And from the null here, I put it into a switch here. And how it switches is actually using this one. I use the null from inside here, this null chop, and I select it into here to make it like switch in between smoother. I place a filter and I place it into the index here, and then I use this button to change scenes. So it's like this. First scene. It's quite laggy because I used too many videos. So that is all for my final project, and thank you for watching.